with our Constitution, actually came into being in two basic levels, but three steps. First of all, go back to our history. Who are we as a nation? What are we? Well, I have an ancestor who came over in the Mayflower, so I'm going to pull rank on that one. Just to remind this president who was born here. And who has our spirit in his veins, which this president clearly does not. That we came here not as refugees from Europe. Yes, we brought many people here who came as refugees, who came as the poor, escaping from terrible conditions in Europe to a place of refuge, which we offered. But this country was not founded by people fleeing from Europe. This country was founded by Europeans. It was founded by Europeans as typified by the Mayflower, typified by the Massachusetts Bay Colony, typified by Pennsylvania, typified by some things in Virginia and so forth. These were people who came to the United States. Why? Because of a famous priest, Cardinal Nicholas of Cusa. And Cardinal Nicholas of Cusa, who was actually the founder of modern European science and the crafter of the concept of the modern nation state in his Concordancia Catholica and in his Doctor Ignorantia on Science. He, toward the end of his life, recognized that the degeneration which had occurred in Europe meant that European civilization was not a safe place for civilization, that the old oligarchical relics were still predominant. And therefore, his proposal was that people in Europe go across the oceans to other continents and establish connections on other continents with which to bring the best of European culture, which we wish to defend against European occupation, bring it to these other parts of the planet, and there to build up, in concert with people we would find across the waters, to build up a civilization which would in turn contribute to the rescue of a corrupted Europe from its own sins. Shortly after the death, essentially, of Nicholas of Cusa, we had a young man called Christopher Columbus. And Christopher Columbus was a Genoese who was a very good sea captain who worked in the Portuguese interest in exploring the Atlantic Ocean, who was quite familiar with the peculiarities of the Atlantic Ocean as a navigator. And he, in Portugal, ran into the papers of Nicholas of Cusa, with a friend of Cusa there. It was actually one of the trustees of Cusa's estate. And he became familiar with this concept of moving across the Atlantic Ocean, across to the continent on the other side, which they knew was there. There's no mystery about that to them. And to establish a bulwark of civilization across the water, bringing the best of European civilization across the water to here, and to thus to have a development of the best of European culture, free of the oligarchical corruption prevailing among European nations. There were many attempts in this direction, some from Spain and so forth, to follow Columbus's intention, and that was his personal intention. From about 1480 AD, that was his intention. He finally got the money to make the trip in 1492, but his intention was 1480, when he had correspondence with a lot of people in Europe on planning this voyage. So because of the influence of the Habsburgs on the Spanish and Portuguese colonization of the South and Central America, the intention of Cusa was not fully realized in those parts of the world, though there are fragments of that and important influences of that type in South and Central America. It's only inside this nation, the United States, that we achieved the establishment of a form of nation state which met the requirements that Cusa had intended. The first part where this development became secured was in the settlement in Plymouth, the Mayflower settlement. That was followed by the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Now, these people were not refugees from Europe. These were stalwart intellects, capable people who left Europe to found a place of refuge for culture. And they built up these two colonizations in the Massachusetts Bay Colony and the Mayflower Colony. They built up a mini-state which up until about 1688 maintained that tradition, that direction, under people such as the Winthrops and their associates. So this was suppressed then by the British in the struggles of 1688-89. But then it was shifted with the youth of Benjamin Franklin, shifted into the area of Pennsylvania, the same intention, because of the corruption which the British had brought into the Massachusetts Bay Colony. This continued. And then you have a German, a great scientist, and one of the founders of the Renaissance in Europe of the 18th century, Abraham Kessler, whose circles then made contact with Benjamin Franklin and company in the United States, what became the United States. As a result of this Leibniz influence reflected explicitly in the Declaration of Independence and also in the Constitution, the idea of how to organize a nation state was established, beginning with a paper by Benjamin Franklin on paper currency. So we went through then, in 1673, the British Empire had begun through a treaty organized by a war. And the British East India Company was already an international empire. British monarchy was a different case. Later, the British monarchy became totally integrated with the empire. But at that point, Lord Shelburne and company dominated. So in 1763, February 1763, the Treaty of Paris, in which Shelburne and company dictated the terms of a creation of a new empire, the empire of the British East India Company, was a breaking point. The result of this, the radiation of the first policies emanating from the British East India Company back into the Americas, caused a break in the leader circles in what became the United States toward a break with the British Empire. That became the struggle. And there was a division from that point on between the traitors, the scum in the United States, such as some of the Boston crowd, the East India Company crowd, and those who were for the cause of freedom, the cause of this.